I'm that girl, and we're going to talk to you about seductive looping. Welcome, my friend. How are you doing today?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, you have just introduced me to this delicious term that I have never considered before, and I think I'm going to use it forever.
Excellent. Well, there, I feel quite proud. It popped into my head recently because I had been triggered, and I was triggered. I mean, I saw the trigger coming a mile away. It's a frequent and well-known trigger, and it's just one I get to interact with all the time. And I saw it coming, and it came, and I was triggered, and I worked through it. But there were other stressors or something going on at the same time. And instead of my usual, okay, process, let it go. God, it's gonna come again all the time. This is how it is with this person. It's a relative, right? And instead of that, of letting it go, I started really focusing on it and like bringing it in. And I felt myself falling into this looping that was seductive, because it was like old patterns and old habits. And the old patterns and old habits, which I worked for a long time, did a tremendous amount of inner work to leave, those are all pointed at me. So any anger, disappointment, frustration, rage, the whole thing, all of these issues, instead of placing them where they belong, where I know where they belong now, I felt like bringing them all in to myself, to point them all at myself, take all the blame, take all the responsibility. And it felt seductive because that was like what I used to do. Like, oh, I remember this feeling. I remember this. Oh, this is going to be, yeah, this is going to be unpleasant. Like this. And it went on for a few days, which is really unusual for me. I got some clarity, much needed clarity, and I was able to just literally snap myself out of it. But I'm just thinking about people who are being triggered, who don't have years of inner work, or who aren't in touch with intuition or various parts of higher selves or so forth. And I'm just wondering what it would be like to feel that seduction and to loop negatively and not realize what's happening and how to snap out of it.
Seems like for those people who are constantly finding themselves in a spiral, it seems like their teams are trying to snap them out of it by just sort of bottoming them out, making them have to face their fears and whatever that could look like. So I'm assuming if you're really super afraid of the virus, you're going to be given it to face it and experience it firsthand, because while we can intellectually have all these irrational fears, we will have to go through those experiences to overcome them. It feels like for you, you've just had this beautiful opportunity to be triggered, to be able to identify all of the processes of it, to then remember how you get yourself out of it again.
Yeah, that's right. And I feel just a generalized concern for the collective as a whole, who must be having a really challenging time, having things thrown in their faces repeatedly. I mean, we know that this has been an ongoing process for people, little triggers here and there, little nudges, right? And then you respond and you figure some things out, and then you kind of go along until the next thing. But it's not like that right now.
It's different. It's more heightened. It's more intensive.
Yeah.
We ask the collectives, they're busy triggering so much. And I almost kind of nickname myself, Joe, the Lion King. Well, so I sort of sometimes say, well, I'm Joe, the triggering king, because accidentally, it's not accidental, because it's totally part of my life contract to trigger the shit out of people who are unfortunately oblivious or in denial or distracting themselves or lying to themselves or thinking that they can lie to me, I hold them accountable, and holy crap, does that piss them off? How dare I do my life purpose and contract?
I have also been the catalyst in that way for serious things that people need to deal with, so much so that I actually tried to stop interacting with people altogether for a while.
Same.
I was like afraid to try and make friends because I was like, they're going to end up hating me. And
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
even.
It is like that. And I think, and I just wanted to clarify, I mean, because we started chatting, so I'm not going to be able to do an actual session today, but I can share with you what they wanted me to tell everyone, which was the difference between, again, just to clarify, the difference between judging someone and observing someone. And we all know that being judgmental is not for our highest good, because it kind of keeps us in that loop ourselves and adds that density and gives them that density as well, and a whole lot of stuff. So the difference between judgment and observation is acceptance. We can still see we can still observe the behavior, but what do we do with the observation? Do we judge them, which is they're not accepting their choices and roles and behavior, or so that's the judgment side. Or if we observe it, I think, do we label it? Bad behavior is bad behavior, so we're not trying to be like, oh, they're all fine there with that choice. So we can identify it, acknowledge what that behavior is, but then the next process is, do we accept that? We don't have to love it and process it, but observe it. Okay, so let's just go into full labeling here. Okay, so I see that you're, not you personally, my friend, but someone else, you're an energy vampire. Let's just use labels. You're an energy vampire. I can acknowledge that. I'm not going to judge you for it and criticize you for it, but I'm going to know that that is your demeanor, that is your behavior, that is your agenda. And how often can we see these energy vampires from a mile away and still, are we going to avoid them, or are we going to watch them, see them, and observe them and not buy into their demands and requirements from us? Okay, sow the seeds. It's a tricky little dance that.
It's very much so. And my personal trigger is also has got that tendency of sucking the energy out of everyone and everything around him. And it's mostly he's not aware of it, but it's just part of a billion other things. So I am in that place of, okay, I have mostly emotionally removed myself from this, and I am observing. And I know very well what I'm observing. It's a whole host of things that are clearly part of a huge life experience that has been very, very well organized and planned out. A lot of what I witness is not in alignment with me in any way. And that choice of seeing something that is not in alignment and still saying, okay. So my version of acceptance is, I understand that I don't understand the purpose here. I do understand that there clearly is one, because this person is just like rolling around in dysfunction. Right? I don't have to be okay with that, right? But
totally.
But I can accept that I'm not gonna know right now. Yep. And that has to be okay.
I have seen people trigger until they learn the lesson, and then there is no triggering anymore. It's done. It's like it's not, you can do smaller amounts of it, but it's not the same sort of looping and triggering that once occurred. So so when the lesson's done, and when you've got it and you've mastered it, because it doesn't kind of occur again. And what I'm suspecting from your situation is being okay to love someone and not accept or take on their their reaction and their hurt and their
Mm-hmm.
judgment of you and all that sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. It's completely oblivious. It's completely, you can't be separate from it because they're just a very hurt person who is reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, while they will never be who you need them to be, you can accept that that part isn't changing because
Yes.
it's about self-empowering yourself away from it. And then you feel bad because you feel like, well, I should be fully loving this person, in love with this person. And it's that fine line between enabling them, disempowering them, and empowering them. And part of you feels like if you don't fully love his behavior or her behavior, then you're a bad person. And that's judgment on self. And so you're not even judging them for their behavior. You are still wanting to beat yourself up for your moral compass.
Very much so. And I have a very sensitive and picky one that I am very, very in tune with because it's very much a part of who I am and the work that I do.
Yes.
And I work from this spot here where, love, my heart chakra. And so I'm in there, and I connect that way to other people. And it's like this one person, I'm like, and I'm thinking, so if I am who I am meant to be, well, clearly, if I'm moving in the right direction, do I get to put a cross over the, like, do I get to block this off for my own safety when it is actually a sanctuary for healing? It's very complicated. I chose a good one for this time, I think. Sometimes we choose really amazing lessons and experiences, and I'm having some.
Yes. And I have seen that some people who are hurt love to bring down others because it makes them feel good. And so it's almost like when we identify with that, when we see, oh, they're actually getting a payoff, if we're still trying to play the game of being like having a reaction and being hurt from their agenda, then that kind of gives them that trip, and that they love that, and they will find more ways to kind of get their high. Oh, look at them. They're hurt by me being horrible. I love that. And so this is actually quite a lot of some of their own traits and behaviors. So, how do we protect our very empathic, in tune, very aware of observing people's behaviors? And, it is challenging when they are very close to us in our personal lives, where we can't escape them, or can we? We feel like we're responsible for them. And we feel responsible because, let's just say, for example, you're talking about a parent. We chose our parents for various reasons. So what is that? And then, this is why I can imagine you grew up living and being able to fully read everyone and feeling bad about reading their other agendas, their distruth to themselves, the distruth to their world that they are portraying, all that sort of stuff. I don't know if you fully shut it down. I think you still were kind of curious because it was a safety mechanism for you to still be able to read other people just to kind of get a check. But a few times you've been a little bit tricked by what you really want to be as good people. And knowing that even really good people who promote themselves as being good still have their own personal agenda, which is not good for you. Those ones hurt your heart because we need them so much to be the people we want them to be. And unfortunately, that is a misassumption for us. And I think a lot of times, this is a perfect lesson, right? We have role models or icons that we really want to be these amazing people. And then when you scratch out the surfaces and tap into them and find out their agenda, it kind of is disappointing in some regards, but obviously we don't judge them. We just observe them and grow from it.
Yeah, this is a very interesting experience that I'm having. I'm walking in between these roles and feeling if I can feel a boundary, and feeling it for myself, and feeling, is this going to trigger me? And is it going to trigger me because, oh my God, I've dealt with this forever? Or is it going to trigger me because this is touching something inside myself that I haven't worked on yet, that I didn't know was there? And and it makes you kind of paranoid too, because when I'm around this person, I'm like, excuse me, I have to stop mid-sentence and check in. And I just stop. And I just like, is this okay? I have no idea. I get so, it's like literally, I'm in the constant state of trying to be present and then trying to be in touch. You know what that's like. You can just kind of totally
Yeah, absolutely. It is,
interesting.
yeah, it is so it's fun, isn't it? These little experiences that we have, and knowing that it's not good or bad, it's for us to experience.
Mm-hmm.
What if it is just for us to realize we can truly step away from people who are toxic for us? With much love, we can put boundaries on, still love them and support them, but have a rule. I'm not going to be reacting to your, just like divorce the connection. And I think the more that we love ourselves and strengthen our own our own identity of self, sometimes, like, just for example, if it's a parent, we want our parents to praise us and see us for who we are, and be able to fully acknowledge what a gift to humanity we are, but
Right.
when they are processing their own lack of inner work, their own lack
Yeah.
of self-love and all this stuff, they're in that reaction, so they want to hurt us, and so we buy into that and we feel hurt, and it's that dance that we play just for those lessons and experiences, to be reminded of what it feels like to have all of that. So
Mm-hmm.
I love all of the lessons that we have, because how can we not? If we hate the lessons and experiences that we have, I mean, even the really horrible ones, the most tragic ones, there is beauty in those lessons. And while we're
I
going through
agree.
them, kicking, screaming, bleeding, snot bubbles, everything, while we're reacting to those experiences, those really hard ones, when we look back at what we have learned and explored and felt in our life review, or
Yep.
even as we have the luxury of doing now, I feel like you were triggered to remind yourself of how far you've grown, because that used to be you all the time, being seductive with those. God, I love saying that.
Seductively looping myself. And yes, it's like a slow relaxation into old. I mean, they're terrible, but it's like, oh yeah, I know this is like,
I
it's just so
love it.
easy.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's extraordinary when we've come out of that. Obviously, you've come out of it, and you're like,
Mhm.
whoa, it's like reminiscing of my
Mm.
20s and 30s and 40s, of how we used to live. And I think when you have another batch of being seductive and having that loop, I bet you every single step of you going down and you going back up again was perfect, on point, learning, unpacking. Everything was
Yes.
just purposeful. And I think there's probably,
Aha.
you've already learned the lesson now. And so that's why when you reflect back on it all, that's the end of the cycle, because you're not going to be reacting as you once were.
Which is a lovely, lovely thought. And I noticed as I was going up, back out of the loop, that every step going back up was a little higher from the target. So that I was like, I have a little more perspective and distance, a little more. Oh, I have a little more perspective and distance. And it's like, okay, I can finally get back to that place. And I'll tell you, one of the truest moments of grace in my life was when it clicked in a very profound way for me that I honor all the pain. I have tremendous respect and honor for those experiences and all of their wretchedness in all of the different ways, because without them, none of this would be happening
No growth.
for any of us. Yeah.
Yeah. That's that fun part of duality. And as we know, everything is less, everything's purposeful, and it's lessons and experiences and, all of that fantastic stuff, definitely a different ball game from actually experiencing it, crawling ourselves out of it. And, I think this is the hardest thing, being grateful for the lessons and actually honoring them, because as we know, those people who play the other side to push us to grow, to really strengthen us, and they are playing their roles really good to force us to stop seeking out outside approval, forcing us to love ourselves because we think no one else can love ourselves, forcing us to grow and triggering us, and so explosive. And yet it is a beautiful, beautiful lesson that they're giving us, even though we hate them and kicking and screaming and, all that sort of stuff. It's so that range of all of those connections. And, when you go and do your life review and you realize, oh, that person, actually, that was a great thing. We organized that. Love that. Thank you for those experiences, my friend, who I thought you were my sworn enemy. It's all for growth, and nothing spiral us. We don't get spiraled down any further. We every time we feel like we are spiraling down, it's a fraction of where we used to be. So think about when you were aspiring the most, say like 10 years ago, and what a spiral would look like. And it would take you maybe months or weeks to even get over something. And now you're like, I see you spiral. I'll give you two days of my time max.
I love that. Yes. And I like to think that because this particular trigger in this person is so integral and interrelated and of profound purpose through all the parts of my being and experiencing and incarnating as a person, the fact that this is like the last knot, I am choosing to think of it that way. And I can, I think I can be okay with still being me and being a person of a being of tremendous love, and still have distance that is appropriate, because I can do it with other people. I can love anybody from afar.
Heroes
I've set a really good challenge for myself this time around. So I must be, I must be capable of overcoming it. It must be.
Yes. And so many people who I've had conversations with, they say, well, how am I supposed to be of service? And you say, well, you're supposed to love them. You're supposed to accept other people. And they say, oh, I can totally do it to strangers, people on the street, love them, love everything about them, accept everything. And yet we have a few people that are closer into our lives that are those real, you can't fudge or fake loving. You have to fully go through all of it. And so it's kind of like when we try to skip ahead in our journey and be like, oh, I'm totally mature, I totally accept everything and everyone, but then there's those little people that are within those boundaries that are in your faces. And yes, we can divorce our friends, divorce partners, divorce our family, but if we haven't learned those lessons of personal boundaries and personal close friendships, they will keep coming and coming and coming until we master the shit out of it.
That's right. And it requires awareness. It's not like, oh, I got lucky and it worked. You have to know, you have to be participating for it to really, really mean something and be of value in that way. And that's something that I have found that a lot of people, that's a sticking point. It's dealing with it and realizing what you're doing when you're dealing with it and why.
And so many times we see good people who have other agendas to take things from us, like our energy or, whatever. They've got another agenda rather than having a true friendship that is a one of growth and maturity and respect. they may not have the maturity yet to honor that. And that's not,
Yep.
and that's not an insult to them or us. It's just where they're at in the journey. And so you will find these friends who are, on their journey, but for whatever reason, it's very clear that they're not true in alignment to our moral compass, or they have other agendas. And sometimes it's really hard to want to admit to ourselves when we see one of our friends having a different agenda, which is not for our greatest good. And so it's kind of, that's seductive. Do I just ignore it? We realize when you ignore something, it doesn't go away.
No, and I also do are they conscious of this? Do we need to address it on like multiple levels? That's not really, yeah.
And again, it's our team saying, oh, they haven't mastered that. Okay, so they think they've beat the system, they're ghosting that friend kind of thing. And then, it will come up in another situation, another angle, or something else. So it's about, once we learn those lessons, and I think this is why a lot of people want to dismiss their intuition, is because when you can read someone's agenda and it is not fantastic, then we think we are bad people. And as you were finding with that looping, you were wanting to fully blame yourself for their behavior and approach to try and belittle you and put you into that that negativity, that death spiral of self-hatred.
Right.
Okay. Getting way too comfortable with the slang and being casual now.
So it's not technically a death spiral of hatred, although I also enjoy flowery language and enthusiasm. So I'm with you there. Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah. It's so exciting to explore these things and know we get to choose whether we want to react to them or not. And that is the really empowering thing. Once we realize, oh, I'm feeling emotions about this and it's not making me jazz hands with joy, then, okay, I'm going to stop here and think the lessons. What is the lesson here? What's the purpose? And it's fantastic when we stop the looping of emotions to then be like, okay, hang on a minute. This feels familiar. What am I trying to learn from? And I'm noticing, and I'm hearing this from others, it's so fast. We are having epiphanies so fast. We're learning lessons. Like we're going through that
processing.
We're going through that buffet smorgasbord, and we are just, bite-sized pieces of everything and plowing through it.
Amazing. Yeah. Yep. Truly incredible watching people sit through, acknowledge, process, feel the feelings, and then let it go and be done. And they're like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but I just have to tell you what you just did because it's so amazing. And I want you to know how this all came together and that you did part of this. And,
I feel like with your original concern about humanity and how hard it's going and how, it's not aware of that seductive cycle. But I feel like because the things are so dramatic now and so obvious now, and they're having a lot of their own physical reactions and epiphanies, I feel, and I have to trust that they are awakening up at extraordinary numbers, and noticing what's happening around them at a rapid rate. And
yes,
I know that we can be overprotective for humanity, we can over worry for everyone, but when we understand the lessons and the growth from a trigger, we shouldn't be trying to avoid them from that experience. No, it's not nice, but we've had lots of not nice things happen, but wow, all the gifts we get from the overcoming it.
I learned that was a big lesson for me a few years ago, was coming from the way that I am, was what actually was happening by my attempting to sometimes in my caring and caregiving in various ways, I was actually denying people the experiences that they needed to have that are painful and full of suffering. And in stepping back and going, okay, I love you. And on the inside of my head, I'm like, I'm honoring your suffering because I know there's a much bigger picture here, but you're correct. It's all so insanely organized and supported,
Yeah.
and from every angle. And that's something that it's hard for me, and I'm constantly in there. It's hard for me to remember and keep that in the front of my awareness.
Yeah. But if they know, oh, she will remember this from another time. So it's almost like they'll give you amnesia for you to stumble into that experience again, to learn from it. So, sometimes where we feel like we might just need to write on our hands, it's purposeful, there's lessons to it, it's experiences. They will probably like make it fade off that day just so we can have that experience. So
I know
we can't beat the system, unfortunately, even though we'd try. What I wanted to say is, yes, that's that whole enabling. And you came from such a beautiful place to protect them, love them. And, what we're doing is delaying their experiences. Yep. And we know when we have grown out and raised our vibrations, things are less and less and less scary. And so many people are wanting to pick up humanity, love it, and then just throw it into this higher perspective without all of those lessons and learning. And I mean, that's one approach.
That's why we're right here, right now.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah. And I mean, they've kind of explained it as well in sessions, but I feel like they're so high advanced with their sort of like analogies to try and help us, but when we have to apply the situations to ourselves, that's when we get to be able to identify. And this is why they're trying to say, listen back to the sessions, because you will be like, now I can apply this information. Now I can apply that here. And it's great confirmation. This is why they're saying when you listen back to the sessions or their messages, when we have grown a bit, we can hear it from a whole new perspective. And they, just like us, they will remind us of, and this is when we're talking to you about this, and they'll give us that little flash of a memory or a recall when they're like, trying to marry up the lessons with what they were saying. So it's pretty fun.
Well, you're hearing it with new ears because you have done that much growth. I mean, that's what it feels like to me. I'm hearing it with new ears. And that's where I am now.
Yeah.
And I also find that when I realized when I got the talking to about enabling and what that actually was doing, I was like, I'm gonna have to sit with this for a while because I'm not that's not what I wanted to do, and I'm not happy about this. And I was thinking, how the hell am I gonna tell the difference? But that discernment, it just comes right along with doing the inner work and being mindful. It just shows up.
Yeah. And people get pissed off. I am going to love and do everything for everyone. How dare you? That's my light working responsibility to love everyone.
So much anger.
Yeah, I know. They're pissed off because their reward system is being a hero and helping everyone. And so they're like, I'm such a good person because I help everyone. I do everything for everyone. Look at me being a martyr. I'm burning myself out. I'm like completely ignoring myself and my own needs, but everyone loves me. I'm so helpful and everyone tells me this. And so it's kind of like, that's when they get that big shake up. I'm not saying that this was for you, but it really triggers people because it's like, no, that's where I get my praise. That's where I get my recognition from. Actually, I won't take that away from myself. I need this. I need to be of service this way.
Pissing off somebody or stepping in, breaking that cycle for somebody when that's their self-identification. I have, that's a kind of special kind of wrath. It's like, you're robbing me of my holiness. And like, I'm really not. I'm really, I swear. But I mean, it's like, excuse me, I'm going to go have, and I'm going to go be incandescent with rage, and then, okay, I hope you realize you're still a person on the other side.
I find those, when we do have that intention of saving the world and being that hero, we totally distract ourselves from our own inner work. And so, this is when even with our good intentions, when we're trying to help people, it's almost like we have to chase them down. Don't run away from me. I'm loving you and I'm helping you and I'm saving you and I'm doing this, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And your teams will be like divorcing you from that situation because you're stifling them for whatever reasons. And it's a little bit challenging. So you've again checking your agenda for what you're wanting for people. And there was something else that just came up. I can't remember. This time I can feel them excited that, we're having this conversation today because, when we try to help someone, it truly does come from a loving place, but it may not be for their best good for that person because we're trying to force them to skip some of those lessons.
Yes. And it actually ends up hurting them in the long run, which is the opposite of what you want to do. But once you get into the perspective where you understand that it's all experiences and purposeful and meaningful and organized and supported, that stepping back really isn't so painful because you're like, I'm here for you for the pain part, but on the inside, I'm like, oh, you're growing.
It's like when I had this experience where people refused to love themselves and respect themselves, but demanded that I should fully love them. And I was loving them, but I was not doing everything that they demanded from me. And so it was like, they took it as like abuse. Oh, she's not loving me. She's not at my beckoning call to help me, struggle and all that sort of stuff. And it was, it just got really concerning that people refuse to love themselves, refuse to be honest and do their own inner work, and still had the audacity to demand that I should give them lots of attention and lots of praise and lots of love because they don't have it for themselves. And when you, with love, say you need to love yourself, you need to do your inner work, and they are like, who do you think you are? Telling me I need to do my inner work, telling me I've got to love myself. No, you're a light worker. You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to do all my inner work. Tell me what to do, blah, 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 blah. How do I move forward? And it's like, I just told you. And so they'd get really fucking pissed off because they don't want to love themselves. They don't want to accept that everything is purposeful. They don't want to accept that there were supposed to be lessons that they were wanting to overgrow and overcome. So then they flip into victim mode, and you can't tell someone who's in victim mode, I think you're in victim mode, because you just have to turn inward. You have to turn inward. Yeah.
That's how it goes. And I love you and support you, but if you refuse to do that, I can't tell you with different words what you want to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been, I'm just thinking of somebody, we've had this conversation like over the months, like 15 times. And you've said, say, but I want to be growing. I want this, and it's not happening. I'm like, okay, here's how you do it. Go within, learn to love yourself. And then a month later, it's the same conversation.
It's their choices. It's their choices. And it's hard because they still haven't stepped into the full accepting of self and full loving of themselves and full understanding. And so it's like, again, we read their agenda. They don't really want to help themselves because they want people to focus on them, give them attention for their hard lives. And so they're trying to, beat the system. And when we hold people accountable and say your behavior and your actions are the reactions and the equivalents of what your life is right now, they don't want to be responsible for their own choices. They don't want to be responsible for their own mindsets. And they are wanting someone to help them themselves, and we can't do their inner work for them as much as we would love to. I mean, God, how many years have we tried?
Thank God we can't. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
You're like, excuse me, I have an opening at 10:15 for all of your trauma, and I'll be back after tea.
But we do, as empaths, we listen to our friends and we listen to people who have struggled and have got these really, really hard lessons, and we just pile that onto our responsibilities. We think about them. We think about how to help them out of it. We give them all the answers and solutions because we want to save them. And yet it's still, I mean, they won't be able to hear us if they haven't come to those conclusions and experiences themselves. So,
yes. And entitlement entitlement is a very difficult place from which to be introspective and honest.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's a big one I've discovered. Lots of people who feel entitled because for whatever reason. And so
Mhm.
they are really distracting themselves from their own
Yeah.
responsibilities and feel very comfortable being
Yes.
in their looping and their lack of inner work because you don't understand. I've had it hard. It's like we've all had it hard.
It's so much more difficult because you have to actually undo all the entitlement first. I mean, they have to undo
Yeah, yeah.
all of that, which has been usually the product of many years of careful construction. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
man.
I think because they got attention from being a victim, so then they are,
Yeah.
it's like you have victim status and then you've got entitled victim status, and that's kind of like the elite sort of.
Yeah, it's the double doozy.
Yeah, and it's kind of like I see people with small egos that don't feel worthy, so they want to constantly help heaps of people, and they attract people with big egos who are seeking people to just praise them, support them, tolerate their bullshit and all that sort of stuff. And so you find that, what is that called, people are saying, oh, that's the narcissist and this is the empath. Ultimately when people are trying to misuse and abuse people for their own personal agenda, they're obviously hurt. They've obviously got lots of insecurities and they've got control problems and blah, 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 blah. I mean, we could label everything till the cows come home, but how do we as empaths find our balance, find our boundaries, still love the shit out of everyone, have acceptance of everyone else's behaviors and responses and actions, but still not let it knock us over?
For me, when it's not the person who has been triggering my whole life, but in other cases, right, it's actually withdrawal, and being extremely mindful of any interaction, and it stinks sometimes, but when you have access to a bit of the higher perspective, you have access to some of the bigger picture, and you can see the dysfunction and the toxicity, like potential here for a great big old fat mess. I feel responsibility to, I know better. I'm going to go ahead and just back myself out of all of this, even if I don't want to, because there are other things that are good. I'm just backing out now.
Yeah. And when we aren't in victim mode, when we want to complain about, oh, that empath, that narcissist, that energy vampire, blah, 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 they can't be those labels when we don't play our role. And so, we are just as guilty playing the dance with that seductivity. And and that's part of being accountable for our own responsibilities and actions and behavior. But when we are not liking the outcome of our reactions from those interactions, we don't want to see our role in how we played that. But in saying that, when you're just this beautiful, open-hearted, loving person who just wants to heal the world and help the world, that can cause us to have pain and be misused and abused because we've come from that pure integrity, that pure agenda, and people will see that and want to take and manipulate and coerce and get that high energy and get all of this sort of stuff. And that's also another key. It's so weird. It's of course, if we were talking about one specific example that may help people understand more of the dynamics here and the aspects, but I think a lot of people are having, oh, I remember this time, oh, that's definitely talking about this relationship, their own, we've all experienced it for whatever. And of course, the empaths and everyone is having those experiences. The narcissist is having the experience of how easy it can be to manipulate and coerce and control people. But what do they really get from it? It doesn't raise their vibration.
At the end of the day, completely empty.
Yeah. But they have to learn that. They have to learn that their behavior and their approach and their attitude gives them that full emptiness to the point where if they don't learn from it and don't grow from it, the guides will remove people from your life. So because if you can't control your urges to control, manipulate, and be a little monkey bum, the universe will take people away from you. So you just have to focus on yourself. And it's almost like they're sort of saying, can you just control yourself? Can you manipulate yourself? And then when you realize that, people have manipulative behavior and they're trying to do it to themselves, then they actually have to realize, actually, this isn't working for me.
That's a really hard one, sitting there at the end of the day, all alone, angry at the world, because it's still everyone else's problem and everyone else is the idiot. It's hard to watch that go on for like a really long time and finally go, this is a choice of whether or not they're going to go ahead and just like surrender and look inwards for the first time ever with honesty or not. And it's not up to anybody but their very own soul and their very own self.
Yeah. And so I think when you're in denial, I think that's when the universe starts mirroring the world to you, because if you're not wanting to go within, then you will get those triggers outside of you. You'll get those experiences to really face them and confront them. So
I like that. I hadn't thought of it quite like that. And I really like that, because yes, I'm gonna give that a good think in a little bit. That's really well done. Yeah. For those who are going to refuse, at some point it is still free will. And they can still refuse always, because you can see it happen. I mean, right. But there's a lot of opportunities that you're going to be given for, down to the very last second of possibility. And man, it didn't have to be that hard, but if it needs to be, I guess it's going to be, right?
And that's the whole sort of premise of the old earth experience, like you have many opportunities to avoid that challenging epic experience for whatever reason. So they're using their free will to, buy that one-way ticket to old earth. So lucky. But then ultimately, it's not a punishment, because there is also people there that are going to be, of service on the old earth as well. So, pick a path, choose a choice. Okay. I loved talking to you. I want to talk to you more, but I'm going to stop recording and then have a good old gossip and and share more. But I just thought this was a great connection and super purposeful. So, okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.